Hey everyone, Vincenzo Calla here, and welcome to episode 37 of Let's Discuss Politics. Today, I'm glad to be joined by the Mayor of Ottawa, Mark Sutcliffe. Before I start, I just wanted to make a very special note that this interview marks the 100th interview I have done since starting VCalla Productions in the summer of 2021. I want to thank everybody for their support over the past year and a half, and I look forward to continue to doing many more interviews with the people you are interested to hear from and learn more about. So today, I thank you, Mark, for joining me, and thanks for participating in this very special 100th interview.
It's my pleasure, Vincenzo, and it's an honor to be your 100th interview.
Well, it's so great to have you, and let's get this interview started. So our first segment is called Mark's Story, where we'll talk a bit about who Mark is and his political history. So first off, I wanted to ask you a bit about yourself. Can you tell me a bit about yourself, your story, and how you got your start in politics? And I know you were in journalism, so how did you get that start?
Well, I guess it depends how long a story you want,
Mm.
Vincenzo. But I was born in Ottawa. My parents were immigrants to Canada. They came from two very different parts of the world. My mother moved here from China. My father moved here from the north of England. They both arrived in Canada at about the same age, in their late teens, early 20s, and found a life here and met each other working at the MetLife, the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company in downtown Ottawa, which was a big employer at the time. And they had my sister and me. And so I grew up in Ottawa. I was very lucky and privileged to grow up in a, with loving parents in a middle class home and at a time of peace and prosperity in a wealthy country. My parents came from very different backgrounds. So I feel very fortunate, and I always talk about the role of luck in my life. And I had a long career in broadcasting and journalism, on the radio as a columnist and at one time executive editor of the Ottawa Citizen. And I was an entrepreneur. I started a number of different businesses, including the Ottawa Business Journal. And I volunteered a lot in the community with United Way, with Orchestra, with Run Ottawa, with the Royal Ottawa Hospital, with so many different organizations. And I wasn't planning to have a career in politics. That wasn't really in the works. And then, last year, I was encouraged by some people, and I made a decision to enter the race to be the next mayor of Ottawa. And that I made that decision in June of last year, and here we are, 7 or 8 months later, and I was fortunate enough to have been elected in October as the next mayor of Ottawa, and I've been doing the job for about 3 months now, and really enjoying it.
So before we go on to talk a bit about the transition for you into the job as mayor, I wanted to ask you first off, why did you eventually decide to make that decision to jump in the race and run in this election, which was very much a change election in our city?
Yeah, I'd heard a lot from people in the community about the need for change and the need for a new kind of leadership. And I've always been someone who has wanted to serve my community. I talked about the role of luck in my life, and I've always felt an obligation to pay that luck forward, to help the most vulnerable, and to serve my community. And my wife and I had talked a number of times about how fortunate we were, and how if there was an opportunity for us to do more in the community, we always wanted to do that. I didn't know, when we had those conversations, we never settled on one thing. But over the course of the spring of last year, a number of people who I thought, and I think many other people assumed, would be running for mayor, former city councilors, or at the time, current city councilors, other people from the community. One by one, they all seemed to decide not to run. And my wife and I talked about it, and we thought maybe this is the big thing we could do to serve our community. And so I talked to a bunch of people and got their opinions on it, and started to explore it. And people felt that this was maybe an area where I could make a difference and bring my leadership experience to the city. So I decided to put my name forward, and from there it's up to the community to decide who they want and what's important to them. So you kind of you it's like applying for a job. You put yourself out there and see what happens. And again, I was lucky enough to win a majority of votes in the election, and I'm now very fortunate to be able to serve my city.
Well, and you putting it out that sort of that you said it's like applying for a job is it's so fitting for this channel because 60 episodes of a show I did called The Political Job Interview. I interviewed 60 candidates running for election,
Yeah.
and 8 of who are now sitting councillors. And it's such a great way to think of running for election. You're putting yourself forward and the people get to choose who they want. And before we go into the next segment, I wanted to ask you, what was that jump from journalism to the mayor of Ottawa, of Canada's capital, like? I remember when I was little, I used to listen to the radio and I heard you on CFRA a lot when I was little, and you have a long career in journalism. So what's that like, jumping from covering it to actually being it?
It's a great question, Vincenzo. And so I would say in some ways it's a complete departure. And I'm the one being asked questions and having to answer them now instead of being the one asking the questions. Interestingly, for the last 10 or 15 years, I've been the person moderating all of the televised debates for all the city council seats and for the mayor's race in the last few municipal elections, provincial and federal elections too, for the local candidates. So I was used to being the moderator of the debate, not a participant in the debate. So that was a big change to be somebody who was participating in election debates and now to be a politician. I still don't think of myself that way, but I know I technically am a politician now. In other respects, it's not been a significant change because there's a lot of communicating in the role of mayor, and so my experience as a communicator, as a writer, and as a broadcaster is very transferable to this job. And the other thing is that a lot of the issues that I'm talking about now and discussing with people are the same issues that I was covering as a journalist and talk show host in the past. The approach of being a talk show host, of sort of putting a question out there and asking people, what do you think about this? And hearing from experts and members of the community and soliciting all those opinions and then forming your own ideas on how to move forward. That's very similar to the role of being an elected official. So I think there are some transferable skills that I brought from my broadcasting career, my journalism career, and also from being an entrepreneur and leader in the community. And then there's part of it that's just a complete departure from what I did before, and being on the other side of the table from where I used to sit.
Well, there's a couple of journalists turn politicians that have had on this show before, and it's always interesting for me to be the person asking the questions to the people that have been around asking the questions to other people for so long. So it's been very interesting for me to sort of see, and you're another one that has now joined me that is now sitting in the mayor's chair, formerly being a journalist. We're going to go into the next segment now, which is called Serving as an Elected Official, where we'll talk a bit about your community or about Ottawa and your hopes as a newly elected official. So first off, plain and simple, what's your favorite part about Ottawa, and what are you looking forward to the most about being the mayor of our great city?
Well, it's a tremendous honor for me to be the mayor of my hometown, and Ottawa is a wonderful community. It's an enormous city geographically, and I got to know it even better during the election campaign. I had already been to every part of the city, obviously, throughout my life and career here, but I saw more of it than ever before, and I love the rural parts of the city, the suburban neighborhoods of our community, and of course the downtown part of Ottawa as well. What I love most about Ottawa is the people, and I have experienced the generosity of this community so many times as a journalist, as a fundraiser. Many times when I was a talk show host, we would raise money for important causes in the community, and then as a marathon runner and as a fundraiser, I've tried to raise money. I've raised more than $250,000 for the Ottawa Hospital and for other causes in the community. So I've witnessed firsthand the generosity of the city of Ottawa and the incredible people who volunteer in the community and who work hard every day, the people who work in social services and for not-for-profit organizations, the people who have the vocation of helping the most vulnerable in our community. I've witnessed their dedication and their perseverance and their innovation and ingenuity so often. And so to be able to connect with all of those people as the mayor is really, really exciting and really inspiring. Even since I've in the 12 weeks that I've been mayor, I've been meeting with so many different community organizations and not-for-profit groups and others who are just doing amazing things in our community to make our city better and stronger, and in particular to help the most vulnerable. So I find that all very empowering and inspiring to witness.
Now, before we go on the next segment, I'll have a question about issues that you want to focus on. And I also have a couple questions on that as well. But before that, I wanted to ask you, what do you hope to achieve? What are some key things that you hope to achieve over the next 4 years and potentially other years after other elections? But first off, the next 4 years, what do you hope to achieve as our mayor?
My campaign was built around the theme of making Ottawa safer, more reliable, and more affordable. And that's what I want to do. There's an affordability crisis right now in the city. I know a lot of residents are struggling to make ends meet because prices are rising so much, the cost of food, interest rates affecting their mortgages, rental rates for people who live in apartment buildings and are renting their homes. So there's a lot of pressure on family budgets. And so I want to keep life as affordable as possible for the people of Ottawa, which is why I've talked about keeping tax increases as low as possible, freezing transit fares, and reducing recreation fees for the most vulnerable families in our community. So that's affordability. I heard a lot during the campaign about safety in the community, and that includes a lot of things. When people hear that term, they think immediately about public safety, of course, and about crime and that sort of thing, which is a component of it. But it also includes, for example, emergency services like our paramedics. And we've had an extraordinary number of level 0 events in the last year in Ottawa where there's no ambulances available for the residents of Ottawa. I want to hire more paramedics, and I want to work with the Ottawa Hospital and other partners in the community to dramatically reduce the number of level 0 events so that we're doing a better job of offloading patients at the hospitals so that the paramedics and their ambulances can be back out in the community serving more residents. Safety is also about safety on our roads. A lot of the roads are in pretty rough shape, and that's not good for cyclists and pedestrians and motorists. So we need to fix the roads. So safety is a big part of what I want to accomplish as well. And finally, reliability. I think, it's no secret that the public has lost confidence in our light rail system and in public transit in our city. So I want to restore that confidence by delivering a more reliable service. I think people have also found city services in some cases to be the basic services to be less reliable than they want them to be. So I'd like to work on that as well. And I'll mention one more thing, which is we definitely need to build more housing in our city. And that's really important. So we're working on that. There's other areas too, and I don't want to start listing too many of them, but there's the environment and climate change. There's recreation. So there's a lot of things we want to focus on. But for me, I want to make sure we make Ottawa more affordable for people, more reliable, and safer as well.
And before we go on to the last segment, while we're on the topic of serving as an elected official, I did want to ask you as well. So I know that Mayor Watson, he joined me while he was mayor, and he didn't have a young family like you do with children. And I wanted to ask you, how is that having a relatively young family with children and balancing that with being the mayor of our capital city of Canada? How's that like? How's that settled in for you?
Well, it's not a huge difference. A lot of people have asked me that question. I was pretty busy before. I had a lot of work that I was doing. I did it more typically from home, and now I'm going into the office every day. But so that's one big change. But my wife Ginny and I try to keep things relatively normal at home, and I still take my son to some of his sports events. And I, just this past weekend, my daughter was in a gymnastics competition in Orleans, and I was able to be there and cheer her on. And she did very well, by the way. We were all very proud. And so, we still, last night, we still had family dinner together. So we're trying to keep things as normal as possible. Obviously, there are a lot of pressures on my schedule, but I'm fortunate that I also get a lot of help. And one good thing about this job is it's an Ottawa job, so I'm not, there are members of parliament and members of provincial parliament who every week are traveling back and forth to their constituencies, and I don't have to do that. My job is in Ottawa, and I live in Ottawa, and so every night, I'm back home with my family, and every morning I wake up in the same house as my kids. So far, so good. We're making it work.
So we're going to go into this last segment now, which is called The World of Politics Around Us, where we'll talk a bit about this world of politics that surrounds us. So first off, I wanted to ask you, who is or who was another politician that inspires you, or a few of them?
Yeah, there are probably a number of them, but I guess the one that I would highlight is Barack Obama. I have read a lot of what he's written, some of his books. I certainly followed his political career. It was a historic moment, obviously, in 2008 when he was elected and became the first Black president, the first African American president in history. I was really moved by that moment, and he's just such an effective communicator, and obviously a very intelligent and informed politician. He always brought a lot of thoughtful analysis to whatever he was talking about. He kept an even keel. You never saw him overreacting to anything. And so I'm not comparing myself to Barack Obama, but I certainly was inspired by the approach that he took as a leader. And I admire him as a writer as well, and as a speaker. So I always enjoyed following his career and seeing how his approach to things. So he's probably the politician who's had the greatest impact on me.
And now I wanted to ask you, I know you pointed out a couple of things and what you want to achieve as mayor. And before I go on to a couple of smaller questions I do have on issues, I wanted to ask you, is there an issue that you think that is often overlooked that you want to focus on more?
That's a great question. I would say there are a couple of things, and they're not going to be big surprises. But I think Ottawa's economy is a big issue right now. We are heavily reliant on the federal government as the top employer in Ottawa, and there's obviously been a lot of change to how the federal government works because of COVID, and now we have federal government employees coming back to the office 2 or 3 days a week, which I think will be good for our economy. I know there's a whole other debate about whether that was the right decision, but there's no question it will be good for downtown Ottawa and good for the economy that's happening. The future of downtown Ottawa is still very much in question. And the reason I think the economy is so important is because if our economy is flourishing, that gives us the resources that we need to solve some of the other challenges we have as a community, like homelessness, like food insecurity, and other issues, affordable housing, and more. So everything to me starts with having a strong economy, with having lots of jobs for people, and generating the financial resources, the taxation revenue that we get from a flourishing economy that will help us solve some of the other challenges. And then, I would say the other issue that I really want to focus on is helping the most vulnerable with affordable housing, supportive housing, addressing food insecurity. I think it is to a lot of people mind-boggling that in a city, and heartbreaking too, that in a city as prosperous as Ottawa, a city that has so many resources, a country like Canada, that we still have people who don't have access to good food and to a warm place to sleep every night. It shouldn't be that way. and it's something that we've got to continue to devote. It's not an easy problem to solve. If it were an easy problem to solve, we would have solved it by now. So it's a complex issue, but we have to keep devoting our time and energy and our resources and our most innovative minds to tackling this.
Well, definitely, and the issue of homelessness and the issue of so many of these things are apparent. I mean, I go to U Ottawa, and one morning I went to go to the Rideau Center for a bite to eat, and I noticed a lot of homeless people on the streets, just on the Mackenzie King Bridge, and helping the most vulnerable, helping them thrive and prosper in our great city is just so important. And finally, I did want to ask you quickly something that's on the minds of a lot of people. I know that just last week at the time of this filming, we saw that there's this new opportunity for a renewed relationship with RTG over the LRT. What does this mean to you that we're starting a new chapter in Ottawa? You'll be able to start a new chapter in Ottawa as we move forward with stage 2 and eventually stage 3 of LRT.
I think it's really important that we restore confidence in public transit. And we had an issue in early January where the portion of the light rail line was shut down for 6 days, and that's really disappointing and frustrating. But I hope going forward that happens very, very rarely. Look, no public transit system operates with 100% performance and efficiency and effectiveness. The subways in Toronto and New York and Boston and other cities around the world, they go down from time to time. They're usually repaired pretty quickly, and that's what we have to strive towards. I think there's been a lot of scrutiny on our light rail system, and so now, even if the system goes down for an hour or there's a train that stops for a brief period of time and all the other trains are still running, it sort of gets added to the list of issues with light rail, even though it might be in a category of being a normal operational issue as opposed to a chronic one that proves there's something wrong with the system. So we need to restore confidence in our light rail system, and I'm hopeful that working with our partners, our contractors, that we can do that. And if we're not fighting in court, it means that we can be working together to build a better system for the passengers and for the residents of Ottawa. And so I'm confident that the great team that we have at OC Transpo can work with our partners in the private sector to deliver better results, better performance going forward. Again, nobody should expect the system to be perfect, but what we should expect is that, if there are occasional issues with the system, they're not chronic issues. They're just operational issues. They're problems that happen with any public transit system, and that they're fixed quickly.
Well, definitely, and a thing that's on the mind of a lot of people of Ottawa, and a great way to end our interview today. So that is all for today. Thank you, Mark, so much for joining me for this 100th episode.
It's been my pleasure, Vincenzo. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well, it was so great having you. And if you like this interview, make sure to go check out my other interview with Mark on Instagram for top 10. It'll be coming out on Friday if you're watching this on the date of the release. To stay updated, make sure to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at VC Productions 25. Check out my website, vincenzocalla.com. Make sure to like and share this video. Make sure to also subscribe and get notifications. Let's Discuss Politics is a VCalla production. So until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing off.